T-minus 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0.
Flight control, countdown confirmed.
Imagine growing up and on your way to school, it smelled like rotten eggs. Where gray hay filled the sky, and that was the norm. Where your dad would remind you, que no te metes en el agua, referring to the river down the street. Imagine that your dad worked for 45 years for a company where 5 of his black coworkers died before the age of 50 due to cancer. Imagine that river that your dad told you to not get in was receiving federal funding, not because it poses a risk to the communities of color that surround it, but rather because it poses a risk to Lake Michigan's wildlife. Imagine that same company that's polluting that water is also responsible for releasing 18,000 pounds of lead a year, 173,000 pounds of benzene a year, coronium, PCBs, and other harmful toxic substances to the communities of color that surround it. Can you imagine that? Because I have to remember that, and when I go back home to visit my folks, I relive that. You think as someone who has been a victim of environmental racism their entire childhood, that's the reason I'm an environmentalist today. But I really have to thank my parents and the way that they raised me. You see, my dad, he had a 1/4 acre of a plot of land behind his friend's house, and I'm not 100% sure if he owned it or if he just kind of made it his own. But we would spend so many summer days planting a garden. We were a family of 12. I have 9 other siblings. So for us, planting our garden was a way to nourish ourselves. That garden was so special. That garden was the reason that I learned the life cycles of a frog. When my brother John and my sister Rocio, happy birthday John, we would catch tadpoles in the little ditch next door. That garden is where I learned the foundation of science education. It was where I learned photosynthesis and that plants need not only water, but fertilizer and protection against the substances like cold weather and light. That garden is the reason that I decided to go study biology for my undergrad, where my dad would always joke with me and say, "What are you gonna do, learn to watch birds?" The garden is the reason why I came to Colorado a couple years ago, after witnessing the beautiful mountains and all the shortgrass prairies. That garden is the reason that I'm here today. It's also the reason I became a science educator. You see, as a science educator and working for a school district, I noticed that science education lacks concepts of environmental justice and environmental racism. So, as I'm studying for my dissertation, I started to look up how children and how youth are experiencing nature the way that I did, knowing that they're victims of environmental racism. So as I was researching, I came across an article. That article told me that 11 Denver schools that make up about 8,000 students that are predominantly students of color are situated in a red zone. And a red zone is that they are 500 or less feet away from a major highway that sees on average 30,000 cars a day. Not only did I find out about those schools, I also found out that one of those schools in particular is in a community that is low income and predominantly Latinx. That community is the most polluted zip code in the United States. That school has asbestos, and students are still required to go and learn. That school used to be situated on a Superfund site, and there are still 144 properties in that community that have not been tested for lead or arsenic in the soil. So when we think about closing this achievement gap for our youth of color, I ask, how are we closing this real environmental gap? Knowing that our children are playing in the dirt that could be harmful, that could have lead, that could have arsenic in it. So this summer, I partnered with an incredible organization called Environmental Learning for Kids, ELK, and we decided to develop a curriculum, an environmental justice curriculum for their youth of color. Because what I wanted to know was, how are these youth engaging in nature, knowing that they're in polluted zip codes, knowing that they are close to highways, knowing that there are super fun sites nearby. So as I was going through the summer, I was excited to learn, like, oh, they're gonna tell me what they did this summer, or how they're engaging with nature. And as many of you know, when you have something in mind, it might not always work out that way. And that's what happened this summer. I didn't really learn what positive experiences they were having in nature. Rather, I learned 4 key concepts that have changed the foundation of my environmental movement. And I'll share those with you. And the acronym that I use is I see. Because as they were talking, I'm like, oh yeah, I see. So the first I stands for inclusion. Youth want to be included. We cannot have conversations of environmental justice, climate change, climate action, sustainability without the voices of youth. They might not be able to vote for policies to hold big corporations responsible for what they're doing, but they want to be at the table. Last week we had a meeting with our councilwoman, and sure enough, youth showed up and expressed to her what they feel about climate change. The first C, comunidad. This one was probably the biggest eye-opener. As we were talking about these experiences in nature, one student told me, you know, my community doesn't even have trees, but I can go across I-25 into a predominantly white affluent community, and you better bet that there are trees that line the street. This student advocated for trees in his community. He wanted his siblings to have access to beautiful greenery. He wanted his playgrounds to have grass and to be up to date. He wanted his community to have positive experiences in nature. Not only did he do that, but when we asked who's going to take care of these trees, you know what he said? He said, what about our community members who don't have jobs, or the elderly? These students care about their community. I asked in my post-interview, if you had the opportunity to move, would you? Majority of them said no. They love their community. Why do they have to leave their community? Why aren't we advocating to make their communities better and holding big corporations responsible for the environmental justices that they face? And that leads me to the second I, innovation. Youth are brilliant. They are creating TikTok challenges that they're doing, talking to their peers about climate change in fun ways. They're utilizing youth-friendly platforms like Instagram. And I say youth-friendly because my 10-year-old niece told me, "Yeah, Cristal, you are too old to be on TikTok." I'm still on TikTok, but Black Millennials for Flint, they have an Instagram and they're hosting webinars to engage with their peers because they're not learning about it in school. The last C is change. Youth want change. This is their planet. The future of this planet is theirs. They want change. We have to take drastic action. We have to start caring. We have to include youth. There are so many more youth activists like Marnie Kopeny, or known as Little Miss Flint, or Greta Thunberg. They're in our schools, they're in our communities, they're in our families. So, the next time you're at a meeting about climate change, ask, where are the youth? The next time you're electing your local school board member or policy maker, ask, how are youth going to learn about climate change and environmental justice in school? The next time someone talks about sustainability and innovation, ask, do you know about Xochitl Cruz, who is an 8-year-old Mexican girl in rural Mexico who, because of lack of electricity, she developed solar-powered water heater out of recycled materials? The next time someone says, oh, climate change is just a one-sided issue, ask them, do you know that Republicans, young Republicans now, are starting to call on their senior Republicans to take action about climate change? Youth are serious. The next time someone says, oh, 2020 has been such a crazy year, ask them, do you know that it's going to get worse? Do you know that our youth, this planet, we are leaving to them? And so wildfires, hurricanes are going to be the norm. The next time you're invited to speak at an amazing event like TEDxCherryCreek, ask, can I bring my youth?